My son Leo was 2 years old. He was a beautiful child, all gravity and quiet focus, with a breathtaking shock of dark hair and eyes the color of pale honey. Hazel, just like his great-grandfather's, a genetic detail that had ironically been the first trigger for David's paranoia. But he wasn't talking, he wasn't pointing to things he wanted. Instead, he would methodically empty his bucket of toy trucks and line them up, nose to tail, across the living room carpet. Sometimes he would spend 3 hours moving them, not an inch out of alignment. If a shadow fell across the row, he would scream. The pediatrician, Dr. Chen, used the words autism spectrum disorder, emphasizing the high-functioning end, the potential for extraordinary processing. My then-husband, David Sterling, heard none of that. He sat through the entire diagnostic review in the stiff office chair with his arms crossed over his chest, his jaw set hard, shaking his head almost imperceptibly as the doctor spoke. He wasn't listening to potential, he was listening to fault. In the vast concrete expanse of the hospital parking lot, he stopped me before I could get Leo strapped into his car seat. "This is not possible, Sarah," he stated, his voice tight and dangerously quiet. "My family is normal. My brother's kids are normal. My cousins. This has to come from your side. Or, God help me, maybe he's not even mine." The gaslighting was agonizing. I reached into my purse and pulled out the crisp, official paternity test results he had demanded 6 months prior because Leo's eyes didn't match ours. "He is yours, David. Read the paper. He is definitively your son." He crumpled the paper in his hand. "Then something is broken. You did something during pregnancy. Drank. Took something. Something." I drove home alone that afternoon. The silence in the car deafening. The car seat confining my child. The diagnosis confining my future. David moved into the guest room that night. The thin closed door between our rooms felt like the boundary of 2 different worlds. 3 weeks later, I woke up to an unnerving quiet. He was gone. The note was left on the kitchen counter, next to his wedding ring, which he had placed inside an empty takeout container. I still remember the exact, terrible phrasing. His handwriting was clean and even, betraying no haste. It said he couldn't watch his bloodline be contaminated and that he wanted normal children. He actually suggested I find Oliver's real father to help pay for whatever special schools a child with such severe needs would require. The divorce papers arrived a month later. He signed away every single parental right. No visitation, no updates, no claim to the name Leo Sterling on any future document he didn't want to be tied to a broken thing. David disappeared into his new life, a life where he was the unburdened, successful single man. He told his side of the family that Leo had severe, profound disabilities and would never have a normal life. He told his co-workers and friends, "I was probably an unstable mother who drank during pregnancy." He built a new narrative that cast him as the victim of a difficult, irreparable situation, finally free to start fresh. 2 years later, he married Chloe, a woman who worked in his high-powered finance firm, and they quickly had twin boys. His social media became a constant, suffocating stream of posts about his perfect, normal children, throwing balls and calling him Daddy. The architecture of brilliance. The next 6 years were a blur of sheer effort and terrifying exhaustion. I worked the night shift at Midtown Hospital, spending my days driving to speech therapy 3 times a week, occupational therapy twice a week, and special education preschool. There were days I ran on 3 hours of broken sleep and cold coffee, making ends meet with grocery bags full of sale items and peanut butter sandwiches. My body was bone-tired. My bank account was perpetually empty. But Leo and I were a team. And slowly, Leo's autism began to show itself not as a barrier, but as a key to an extraordinary mind. By 4, while his peers struggled with sight words, Leo was devouring chapter books, reading complex narratives with a comprehension far beyond his years. By 5, he was calculating multiplication problems in his head. By 6, He heard a complicated Chopin nocturne played on the radio and sat down at the second-hand piano I'd bought, reproducing the melody, chords, and texture with near-perfect accuracy. He didn't read music, he simply heard the pattern. His specialized teachers started using words that made me sit up straight. Gifted, prodigy, exceptional. Leo's brain saw patterns in the universe that the rest of us missed. He was a human repository of information, remembering everything he read, everything he heard. When he was 8, he entered a state program for profoundly gifted children. He won the state science fair with a project on mathematical patterns in nature, specifically fractal geometry, that baffled the judges. He was invited to a highly selective summer program at the University of Central Florida. Regular 5th grade math bored him. By 9, he was teaching himself calculus. The local newspaper, the Orlando Sentinel, ran a large feature about him. The headline was simple: 9-year-old autistic prodigy solves problems nobody else sees. That's when the silence broke. The call came from an unrecognized number. It was David Sterling, his voice immediately smooth, confident, and utterly sickening. "Sarah, I saw the article. Why didn't you tell me Leo was doing so well? I have a right to know about my son's accomplishments." I gripped the phone, remembering the crumpled divorce papers. "You signed away those rights, David. 7 years ago." He hung up, but he didn't disappear. He started showing up. At Leo's piano recitals, he sat in the back row, dressed in an expensive suit, taking photos like a proud, devoted father. At the National Mathematics Championship in Dallas, where Leo, the youngest competitor, clinched the title for his age group, David was front and center after the ceremony, shaking hands with other parents, boasting about his brilliant son and how he had always known Leo was special. Leo, standing next to me, just whispered, "Mom, who is that strange man who keeps staring at me?" He was a phantom, a lie made of expensive clothes and ego, the return of the phantom. The final shoe dropped with the acceptance letter. Leo received a full scholarship to the Meridian Academy, an exclusive institution for future leaders. The acceptance generated national media coverage. The story of the autistic genius was a goldmine for human interest news. David saw his chance to insert himself into a narrative of success. He arrived at our small apartment complex in his pristine black luxury SUV, accompanied by Chloe and the 2 twin boys. It was a perfectly staged, picture-perfect family unit designed to project normalcy and stability. "It's time for Leo to meet his brothers, Sarah," he said, standing on the stoop. "We're a family. I can provide things you can't. Private tutors, connections. I am the reason he's so smart after all. My genes are finally showing through." Chloe stood beside him, nodding robotically, seemingly unaware that the man she married had discarded his first son like broken trash. The twin boys, about 5, fidgeted nervously, confused by the strange environment. I told David to wait outside. I walked into the apartment, the adrenaline making my movements unnaturally slow and precise. I went straight to the filing cabinet and pulled out the thick folder I had assembled long ago, every document cataloging 7 years of abandonment, scorn, and eventual success. I came back and handed him the folder, my hand steady. David took it, his confident smile faltering as he opened it. The color drained from his face, a complete, physical evacuation of blood, as he saw his own signature on the termination of parental rights papers, followed by his own handwriting on the note about the contaminated bloodline. Chloe leaned in, reading rapidly, her expression shifting from confusion to cold horror. "David, what is this? What does it mean? Did you really?" "I was young and scared," David interrupted, quickly trying to shut the folder. "I made mistakes. People deserve second chances, Sarah. And look, Leo turned out fine." I pointed to the note. "You wrote that Leo would never have a normal life, that you wanted real children, and that my pregnancy somehow contaminated your bloodline. You demanded a paternity test and then dismissed the results. That wasn't scared, David. That was cruel and deliberate." Chloe snatched the folder away. She flipped through the stack of unpaid medical bills I had covered alone. She read the note again. "He never told me," she whispered, looking at me. "He never told me he had another son. Is this all true?" "Every word is documented," I confirmed. "He didn't just leave. He erased us. He told people I drank. He built his perfect family on a lie." David launched into a desperate torrent of excuses, saying his family had expectations, that he panicked, that the timing was only because Leo was doing well now, and he could finally be proud of him. "You lost the right to pride 7 years ago," I said, my voice low and firm. "You will leave my home, and you will stay away from my son." His face went hard, the mask of the wounded father dropping instantly to reveal the financier. "I have legal rights as a biological parent. Courts favor father involvement. I can afford lawyers, Sarah, and you can't. I will fight for custody and visitation if I have to." The twins began to cry, frightened by his sudden anger. Chloe bent to comfort them, but the scene was ruined. I stepped back, closing the door on David Sterling's stunned, angry face. I locked the deadbolt and watched through the living room window as Chloe drove away, leaving David standing alone on my porch, still holding the folder of his own shame, the fear, and the legal fortress. That night, sleep was impossible. The threat, "I can afford lawyers and you can't," echoed in the silence. I was terrified of what money and malice could do to the delicate stability I had built for Leo. At 2 a.m., I was on my laptop, the screen light harsh in the dark apartment. I searched terminated parental rights reinstatement and can a parent return after abandonment. The legal jargon was confusing and contradictory. Some sites claimed the voluntary nature of the relinquishment made it virtually impossible to reverse. Others cited emotional case law, where judges prioritized the child's right to know both parents, regardless of the parent's past actions. Every story of a father coming back and disrupting a stable home fueled the knot of terror in my chest. By 4 a.m., I had 20 browser tabs open, a racing heart, and a list of 3 family law attorneys. After dropping Leo at school, I made the calls. The first demanded a $5,000 retainer I didn't possess. The second didn't accept payment plans. The third was Mr. Lars Thompson. His secretary, a kind woman with a no-nonsense voice, took my details. When Mr. Thompson came on the line, his voice was measured and steady. I explained the situation, and he scheduled a 2 p.m. meeting. "Bring every piece of paper you mentioned," he instructed. "We deal in evidence." I spent the morning organizing 7 years of documentation. The diagnosis report, David's handwritten note, the signed termination papers, medical bill copies with "refused" scrawled next to David's name, progress reports from all of Leo's therapists, a chronological, damning timeline of willful abandonment. Mr. Thompson's office was in a slightly run-down downtown building, the carpet threadbare, the coffee maker dusty. But when he greeted me, his handshake was solid and his focus was absolute. He was a man of quiet, powerful competence. He took the thick folder and began to read, page by page in complete silence. He spent nearly 10 minutes focused solely on the termination papers and David's note. When he closed the folder, his jaw was tight, but his gaze was calm. "Mr. Sterling's termination is ironclad," Mr. Thompson affirmed, leaning back. "The legal term, voluntary relinquishment of parental rights, is one of the most difficult things to undo in family court. For him to succeed, he would need to prove he was coerced, misled, or mentally incompetent at the time he signed." He tapped the folder. "This documentation, his note, his immediate remarriage, his successful career path, proves he was none of those things. He was cruel and deliberate, but that actually works in our favor. However, he can file a motion to reinstate. Anyone can file anything. We will successfully oppose it. The court's primary concern is stability and the best interests of the child. 7 years of zero contact, followed by this opportunistic return, will not be viewed favorably. we file a formal opposition immediately. I signed the retainer agreement, agreeing to the $200 monthly payment plan. I was terrified, but for the first time in weeks, the knot in my chest loosened. The lie and the leveraging. 3 days later, Mr. Thompson called me with news. David had filed his motion. "It's predictable," Mr. Thompson said, emailing me the document. He claims he was suffering from untreated severe depression when he signed the rights away, that he wasn't in his right mind, and that he's now stable. The lie was slick. It sounded good in legal language. I countered immediately. He got remarried and had 2 more children within 2 years. He built a whole new life. That's not the behavior of someone incapacitated by depression. Exactly, Mr. Thompson confirmed. The timing of his return, coinciding perfectly with the media coverage of Leo's success, tells the real story. But there's more. He paused. The letter threatens to sue you for defamation if you reveal the details of his abandonment, and the termination he claims it could damage his career and reputation. I felt a surge of cold anger. I have proof of every single word. His own writing is in that folder. Precisely, Mr. Thompson said, his voice actually amused. Truth is an absolute defense. This threat is leverage for us, Sarah. It tells us he is worried about his image. That's his weakness. The next move was David's. He called the Meridian Academy. I called Ms. Rita Evans, the Academy's director. She had been incredibly supportive during Leo's acceptance process. I kept the tone professional. My ex-husband, who legally terminated his parental rights 7 years ago, is now threatening a custody battle. I need you to know he might try to show up at the academy claiming to be Leo's father. Ms. Evans was serious and professional. She assured me of their strict security protocols and promised to flag Leo's file immediately. Then she added, chillingly, "You know, someone called 2 days ago, a man asking about parent involvement, volunteering to speak to students about encouraging gifted children." I didn't connect it, but he gave the name David Sterling. David. He hadn't even waited for the legal process. He was already inserting himself into the narrative. He didn't want a child. He wanted a trophy. Allies in social warfare. Mr. Thompson had instructed me to gather character witnesses. I was preparing a list of therapists and teachers when an unknown number appeared on my phone. Chloe's number. I almost didn't answer. Instead, it was Lisa Sterling, David's sister, whose voice was shaking with fury. "I saw his posts, Sarah. He's putting up those old photos of Leo and saying he's been involved all along. He called me. He's telling everyone he's the co-parent. It's a disgusting lie. I remember what he said about Leo being broken. I want you to know I remember the truth and I want to help." I was hesitant to trust any Sterling, but her palpable anger felt genuine. Moments later, my phone buzzed with dozens of incoming messages, screenshots of David's Facebook and Instagram, caption on a 9-month-old photo of Leo. My brilliant boy showing early signs of his gifts, so proud of how far he's come with my support. Caption on a photo of the twins next to Leo's math trophy. "It's a family effort. Dedication is genetic. I am the proud father of 3 gifted sons." The posts were a surgical rewriting of history, a deliberate campaign to establish a false public record. Mr. Thompson was delighted. "This is priceless, Sarah. This is irrefutable proof that his motivation is entirely narcissistic. We will use every single one of these in court." 2 days later, Eleanor Morgan, David's mother, showed up at the apartment. She was an impeccably dressed woman in her early 60s, but her eyes were swollen and red. She stood on the asphalt of the parking lot, apologizing through tears. "David told us you were unstable, that you kept Leo from him. I believed my son. I saw the article, and then Lisa told me what really happened. The note, the contamination. I am so deeply ashamed. I want to know my grandson, Sarah. I know I have no legal right, but please, let me meet him." It was a moment of profound conflict. My anger warred with the knowledge that this woman was standing up to her own son, and admitting her mistake, I told her I needed time to think and to talk to Leo. She left, looking humbled and broken. Meanwhile, David began his campaign of intimidation. I documented every instance: the black SUV parked outside the library during Leo's tutoring, the deliberate, passive presence on the park bench, during our walks, always watching, never approaching. Mr. Thompson immediately filed for a restraining order based on a pattern of harassment and intimidation. The restraining order and the power of truth. The hearing for the restraining order was scheduled 2 weeks before the custody fight. I met Mr. Thompson at the courthouse, a binder of time-stamped photos under my arm. David and his lawyer argued that David was merely attempting to reestablish a natural connection, and that showing up at public places was not harassment. Mr. Thompson presented the pattern. Your Honor, Mr. Sterling did not request supervised visitation through proper channels. He did not send a letter. Instead, he chose to park and stare, establishing a clear pattern of intimidation. This behavior is designed to frighten my client and assert dominance, not to build a relationship with a child he abandoned for 7 years. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes, reviewed the photos. She asked David's lawyer why his client didn't use the established family court channels. The lawyer stammered about natural settings. The judge wasn't convinced. She granted a temporary restraining order instantly, ordering David to stay 100 yards away from me, Leo, our home, and the Meridian Academy violation meant immediate arrest. David looked genuinely shocked that the system he tried to manipulate had consequences. 2 days later, the reporter who wrote the original article called "She had heard the rumors about the custody fight and David's attempted return." I thought about Mr. Thompson's words. Control the narrative. I thought about David's lies on social media. I thought about Leo's quiet stability. I called the reporter back. She came to the apartment and I laid out the truth. The signed termination papers, the paternity results, the refusal to pay, the handwritten note, every single piece of evidence. I gave her permission to quote directly from the contaminated bloodline note. The article ran 3 days later on the front page of the Metro section. The headline was brutal. Father who abandoned autistic son returns only after boy becomes prodigy. The reporter juxtaposed David's lawyer's claim of depression with the chronological evidence of David building a perfect new family and lying about Leo on social media. She quoted David's own words, "I want normal children." The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for David. Social media firestorm. The article was shared thousands of times. The autism community, parents of gifted children, and advocates rallied, flooding his personal and professional social media pages with scorn. Professional ruin. David's employer, a major investment firm, was inundated with calls and comments questioning their commitment to family values. Within 48 hours, they released a statement and placed David on administrative leave pending an internal review. His LinkedIn profile became a public square of condemnation. The final betrayal. Chloe's divorce filing became public record, citing deception and character issues as grounds. The legal blogosphere picked up on the fact that she cited David's deliberate lie about having no other children as central to the divorce. David's perfect life had collapsed. New foundations and peace. With the court date looming, I took Leo to see Dr. Hayes, a therapist who specialized in gifted children facing family disruption. Dr. Hayes was young and kind, putting Leo at ease immediately by discussing his Rubik's Cube collection. Leo is processing this logically, which is good, Dr. Hayes told me privately. He understands that David's rejection speaks only to David's flaw, not his own worth. But as he gets older, his emotional understanding will deepen. We need to ensure ongoing support so he can process the grief of being rejected by a parent, even one he never knew. I immediately scheduled weekly sessions. Then Mr. Thompson called. David's lawyer is requesting to withdraw the motion entirely. He wants to avoid the public spectacle of a hearing where Chloe and Eleanor Morgan would testify. We had won not just legally, but narratively. Mr. Thompson drafted a comprehensive enhanced termination agreement. This document went far beyond the original, requiring David to explicitly acknowledge his termination was voluntary and informed, waiving any future right to appeal based on incompetence or coercion. It was a final, undeniable document that cemented his absence forever. David signed every page without negotiation. The hearing was canceled. The threat was gone. Oliver found me in the kitchen that evening. "Mom," he asked quietly, "the man won't bother us anymore, right?" "No," I promised him, kneeling to his level. "He signed papers that say he can never try to be part of your life again. You are safe." Leo nodded, satisfied by the finality of the legal contract, and went back to his room. 3 weeks later, the slow process of building new connections began. Eleanor Morgan called. She hadn't stayed silent, and she hadn't tried to defend her son. I agreed to supervise visits. The first meeting was at a quiet downtown coffee shop. Eleanor brought a worn old photo album. She didn't try to be a mother figure. She was a chronicler. She showed Leo photos of David as a baby, his father. His grandfather Leo leaned in, captivated, not by sentiment, but by the patterns of genetic traits. He found the source of his hazel eyes, his great-grandfather. He traced his nose shape to Eleanor's side of the family. He asked detailed questions about dominant and recessive genes. Eleanor, who had once believed her son's cruel lies, was now providing Leo with the factual, scientific, and human context of his own origins. She became a regular presence, a quiet, supportive force in his life, always respectful of the boundary I had established. Then, in late October, Ms. Evans, the Meridian Academy director, called me at the hospital. "The board was incredibly impressed by your handling of the custody situation, Sarah," she said. "Your advocacy for Leo, your ability to document and prioritize his stability under immense stress, it's exactly what we look for in our community leaders." She offered me a position in the parent liaison office. The job involved helping other families transition to the academy, connecting them with specialized resources, and guiding them through the inevitable parental challenges that came with having exceptional children. The pay was better than the hospital. The hours were during the day. I would be home with Leo every evening. I would never have to work a night shift again. I was moving from surviving to thriving. I gave my notice at the hospital that afternoon. My supervisor, who had watched me run on fumes for 7 years, hugged me. "It's time, Sarah. You've earned this." 6 months after David's final surrender, Leo won another national math competition. The local paper ran the article no one asked about his father. David Sterling was silent. He had been erased from our narrative, replaced by the truth, by courage, and by the love that had built our life on sheer necessary will. I took the newspaper clipping, framed it, and hung it on our living room wall next to Leo's acceptance letter and his math awards. The walls of our small, happy apartment are covered in the evidence of a life built by 2 people, alone, who were perfect exactly as they were.